Good morning, everyone. Well, depending on where you are, maybe good midday or late morning.
Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon. There we go. Hi, Carl. Nice to see you.
Hiya.
Maybe we'll wait about 1 or 2 minutes so that people can keep trickling in.
Just a quick note that we are recording this.
Mm-hmm.
You probably saw that when you came in, so.
Just to clarify, recording is no cost. Just got it confirmed. So then the moderators, perhaps I'll send out an email. We should just request it before every session. We'll give it 1 more minute. Okay, I think we're gonna have to go because because of virtual conference, the sessions are an hour. So without further ado, first of all, welcome to this session on the first of the two on the CoopConvert project. Without further ado, I'm just gonna pass it to Marcelo Vieira, who is the co-principal investigator of the project. And he's gonna start by telling you a little bit about the project, and then we're going to present some of our research. So, Marcelo.
Thanks, Daria. Well, I'm glad that we're here, and I thank the organizers for a great conference so far. This is one of 2 panels on the conversion to cooperative project, CoopConvert. I am the principal investigator of the project, but it is a real team effort. So we have most of the key players that have been doing research on the project for the past 3 years here today and this afternoon when we are doing part 2. So really, really happy to be doing that. Here's the outline of what's going to be going on today during this panel. I'll just give a brief introduction to the CoopConvert project. Then I will be talking about, Jose Charbonneau and I will be talking about overall pathways to conversions to cooperatives in Canada based on a database that we've built, followed by Marcelo Palladino Castro, who has been doing key informant interviews, including some folks that are on this call today. I believe, John, he interviewed you too. And then finally, case studies with Fiona Duguid and Daria Tarhan. So what is the conversion to cooperative project, or CoopConvert as we call it? It's a partnership-based research project, and we are working in close collaboration with Edicus at the University of Sherbrooke, with Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada, and it's funded by SSHRC, Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, and we have other partners that we've built over the years as well. Partnerships we've built with, for example, the Canadian Worker Cooperative Federation, the Ontario Cooperative Association, Van City, and other partners as well. So this is really a partnership-based project. We got a partnership development grant for it, so we're right on track there. So motivations for the project. Why is it that we started this project? Well, there's about 1.2 million employer-based SMEs in Canada. Nearly 72%, or about 72% of their owners are planning on retiring over the next decade. The majority are over 50. Only 14%, however, have a formal succession plan, we have found out. and 51% have no formal succession plan. So what happens to these SMEs when these business owners retire? There's a lot of money involved here, 1.5 trillion in assets, many hundreds of thousands, so almost 1 million businesses. And also, since we started our project, the COVID-19 pandemic that came in and that put at risk a lot of Main Street small and medium-sized enterprises. As well, internationally, and also to a certain degree in Canada and the US, we have seen businesses close because of neoliberal policies, globalization, the emptying of local communities from local assets. So this is very much the initiatives that have been driving this initiative, this project. There are conversions, obviously, in Canada, and the project, we first set out to map these conversions, and I'll show you a bit of how we did that. But there are no solid policies or uniform policies in place for how to do that. So we wanted to ask why. Why is this the case? Why are there conversions, and what are the enabling environments for them, and how come there aren't more in Canada? What's their makeup in Canada, and why do they fall under the radar amongst SME owners, and how can we promote the conversion to cooperative model? So the objectives of the project, we have 5 major objectives which track our 5 major research streams, and that's to identify and enhance the enabling environments for business conversions to co-ops in Canada. It's a mixed methods approach. We are putting together an international scan. We're analyzing and we're doing an international scan of BCC experiences from around the world. This is currently in progress, and we'll complete this at the end of the year. We've built a current Canada-wide data set of conversions, including a map. We've done this together with CMC, and this is completed. The link to that is there. A survey of retiring SME owners. We've completed this, and I'll be reporting on this afternoon. There's a link to the report there and other publications that we've done. In-depth semi-structured interviews of experts, key informant interviews that are knowledgeable of business conversions to cooperatives. Marcelo Castro will be highlighting some of those findings. And then multiple and contextually embedded case studies, which Daria and Fiona will summarize. And this is almost completed. We have a few more that are left to do, and these are currently in graphic design mode. And in the next few weeks, we'll be doing a major release of many of these reports and case studies. Also, to build capacity for BCCs in partnership with Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada and others in the co-op sector. We've been conducting webinars over the past several years. We've been presenting to different business associations and leaders. We've been producing reports and fact sheets. I'm happy to also say that we're collaborating with the Leadership Lab, the L3 project, in producing teaching cases out of our case studies. Fiona's leading that charge together with L3. So that's really exciting. We have been working on policy initiatives and lobbying the federal government and provincial governments for favorable legislation and policies. We've been working closely with CWCF, CMC and others here, and really building an international and national and international network of developers and researchers interested in the conversion to cooperative model. So that's a bit of the project, and now you'll get a flavor of it from now on of some of the findings. And I'll start with this. I'll be presenting with with Jose from Idecus. And what are some of the pathways to democratizing the economy and saving jobs and converting businesses to co-ops? And I want to situate the Canadian landscape here. This is about democratizing work and the economy by converting companies to co-ops. And I've been doing this research for about 15 years now, and I've discovered that there are 3 major pathways to conversions of businesses to cooperatives. And I write about this extensively in my recently published book, Chapter 2, where I spend time situating the Argentinian experience with conversions from around the world. And there I lay this model out. First, we have labor conflict conversions. This is mostly found in countries where the neoliberal model hit hard. The working workers and austerity measures hit the economy very hard. So not surprisingly, Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, and also parts of Southern Europe. There's mainly worker-led, conflict-motivated on shop floors and defensive moves to save jobs. This is not primarily what we find in Canada. What we find in Canada are negotiated conversions, similar to what we find in Italy, France, Spain, and predominantly here in Canada and Quebec, and Jose will show you that. These are situations where there are there's clear pieces of legislation, policies, and financing mechanisms for converting businesses to co-ops. Usually they're initiated by business owners it's a succession issue, but also businesses that are failing or that are nearing bankruptcy for whatever reason. They're in trouble, and the owners don't want to kind of continue with it, and so they pass it on to workers or the community. And then partial conversions, and we find these in Canada too. As Jose will mention, we'll talk about the worker shareholder co-op model in Quebec. And these are where workers or the community that ultimately take part of the business over don't have complete ownership, or they don't have complete decision-making rights. So for example, ESOPs most ESOPs are partial conversions. There are other types of kind of public sector firms that get partially converted to community ownership and nationalization schemes around the world. So here in the BCC and the Co-op Convert project, the BCCs that exist in Canada are mostly negotiated conversions. So conversions in Canada are present throughout, but primarily they're present in Quebec. And we'll be kind of unfolding why this is the case over the next 2 sessions. But we've tracked in our database 263 active and inactive business conversions to co-ops. There are currently 194 active conversions to co-ops in Canada. And we've tracked a further 77 housing co-ops that were formerly privately owned housing establishments, buildings that were converted to co-ops. But this is not the full account of the housing co-op phenomenon. Conversion, and so we're not including this in this database. This is an ongoing investigation. So here in the next few slides, I'm going to just focus on the 194 active conversions, and in the map, the A stands for active. So in BC, we've tracked 11 conversions to cooperatives. 8 are currently active. In Ontario, 10 conversions, 7 active, and in Quebec, you'll see 225 conversions historically present. 164 are active. Okay. By industry, we see them across Canada's economy, but primarily we find them in 40% of the BCCs we've tracked. We found in the services sector, professional services, education, health, and arts and recreation. This is not surprising because these are anchor organizations, anchor businesses, anchor institutions in small communities across Canada. In Quebec, this is slightly different because in 2 particular major sectors, the funeral sector and the ambulance sector, there were several other factors and other kind of stakeholders involved in conversions. So we do see a kind of a unique way that things happen in Quebec, but in the rest of Canada, including Quebec, these are the predominant models of conversions. And we'll highlight some of these illustrative case studies with Fiona and Daria in a few moments. By type of co-op and by type of conversions, we find 4 major types of conversions in Canada. These are primarily, about 64% are conversions from private firms to cooperatives. So private sector firms to cooperatives. Then next we have partial conversions. So these are mostly led by worker shareholder co-ops in Quebec. Then we have mergers and acquisitions where a current cooperative buys a private firm and either merges it into the co-op or creates another co-op spin-off. This is unique and mostly happens in Quebec as well, especially in the funeral sector. And then we have a few cases of nonprofits converting to co-ops in Canada. Across the board, they're fairly even, except for we don't see many in the agricultural sector, so not many producer co-ops, but worker shareholder co-ops are a big way of doing this in Quebec, but multi-stakeholder co-ops, 2 worker co-ops, and consumer co-ops within the 20% range. And I'll pass it on to Jose, and she'll talk specifically about Quebec.
Okay, thank you, Marcello. So for the Quebec, as you saw in the recent slides, there's been a lot of business conversions to cooperatives. The first one went really early in the history in 1945, but this is kind of an exception, so we won't talk about that. The latest ones, as you can see early on, in the recent years, there's been a lot more conversions being done, and mostly since the 1990s. And as Marcelo mentioned, their failure rate is quite small. So on the left, you see every conversions that happened throughout history that we have listed up to now. Maybe there are some that we are missing, but that we have listed up to now. And on the right, you see the ones that are still active of each of these co-op types. So the main, the major part of the closures that we saw up till now are from the worker shareholder cooperatives or shareholder worker co-ops. I never know exactly how to say it. So these are co-ops, worker co-ops that are a shareholder of the business where the workers are employed. So the co-op is a shareholder of these businesses, but most of the time, the co-ops are not majority stakeholders. So eventually, if the business wants to close, sell, or whatever, these co-ops do not have the major say in what's happening. So that could explain why there are more shareholder worker co-ops that closed or are inactive right now than for the other types of co-ops. And one other thing that we see is that in the early 1980s, the regional development co-ops were created in every region of Quebec gradually. And these helped a lot with, small business conversions. And later on, at the end of 1980s, beginning of 1990s, there were more action in parts from the unionization movement going on to support workers so that they could take back, take over the businesses or convert the businesses. So MCE Conseil that you see here is helping especially unionized employees to go through the acquisition of their businesses. Fondation is a major fund in these types of conversions too, while Chantier de l'économie sociale, as well as, Conseil CQCM, so Conseil de la coopération et de la mutualité du Québec, are actors mostly in other types of co-ops, so less with worker co-ops and more with multi-stakeholders co-ops, for example, in consumer co-ops. And lately, the Quebec government added a program to finance and promote collective, let's say, takeover, to translate it well. So there was a program that was put in place into 2016, and there was also money linked to it that went through the Quebec Business Transfer Center. And so there are specific measures taken to help for these types of conversions. So as you see, different actors are involved in different sectors. In some cases, as Marcelo mentioned earlier, in the funeral sector, for example, the Federation is really, really, really active, let's say proactive, and we'll see that in our panel this afternoon. So if you want to know more, you can join us this afternoon. And in other types of conversions, the union associations are very, very, very involved in the process. So that covers about it for what we see in Quebec BCCs for now.
That's great. Thanks, Jose. And in the case studies you'll be covering today, you'll be getting into some of the details of how things happen in Quebec and how they're different from the rest of Canada. So now we'll pass it on to the other Marcelo in this panel, Marcelo Pellegrino Castro. You're on mute, Marcelo.
I apologize. Yes, I prepared. I have everything ready here, and I forgot the most important thing: the microphone. Yes, thank you, Marcelo. Thank you, everybody, for this opportunity to be here presenting on the results of the project. and celebrating this as well after all this year working together. The key 4-month interview was a very exciting ever for me. I get to know an incredibly amount of very smart people. I learned about the history, about process, motivations, and what leads to BCC's project in general and specifically in certain areas. It was not an easy task for me. I had to do a large number, over 25 hours of interview and make sense of it. So here I just brought a very small synthesis of what I learned from this material collected together with these individuals. The key 4-month interviews was conducted between April 2019 to November 2020. A total of 92 individuals, men and women, in Canada, United States, and Brazil. Why we decided to include this? First, because of the amount of experience and expertise they bring in the work that they do directly or indirectly on the ground, supporting BCC's development. The expertise vary. They come as co-op developers. They come as lawyers specialized in co-op incorporation, and became as well specialized in certain provinces in the areas where have specific legislation specialized in transition. And there is also large support of researchers that have come together in Canada since the 1990s, as Jose was mentioning. There has always been research initiatives trying to understand how BCCs are formed and how we can make this a viable initiative across the country. BCCs occur because there exist fundamental conditions for this. These include, of course, legislations. As Marcelo was mentioned, there's a whole discussion of legislation, programs that facilitate financing, that facilitates communication or marketing about the existence of the option available for owners, a program that exists available for workers to understand the new roles that they will be taking on, and programs that also support the process of buying the enterprise from former owners. The quote that's presented here for one of the key 4 months synthesizes very well what enabling environments are as we understand and as they understand as well. In order to be able to understand and make sense of this, considering that it involves so many dimensions of materials and the cultural interaction that exists to make this possible, relations that exist at the different levels of policy development and political jurisdiction, as well as dimensions of relations that exist between supporters and co-op developers and all the experts supporting the process. In different dimensions, I had to come up with something that could help me. And what helped me was to visualize this as a function that had 3 main variables. And these variables are independent and interact with each other, making the possibility of an environment being stronger or weaker, depending on the intensity and depending on the direction each of these variables pull in the system. So in terms of analyzing this, what might be or what are the general characteristics of Canadian enabling environment as perceived by the key informants? One important aspect here is that all these key informants in the Canadian context are from the Anglo side. So they are not including Quebec, although Quebec is obviously, for obvious reason, referenced in a lot of time. This comes because of the characteristic that involves a diverse, long-standing history of co-op development in the country. There were constant reference to this, including to the worker co-op movement that emerged in Quebec in the 1980s and 90s. Also, because of and this generates an environment that was friendly, let's put it this way, in supporting national legislation with the generation of, for example, of the Canadian Cooperative Act that provides general guidelines for what how the process developed in the country, acknowledged by in key formats in Canada and somewhere and elsewhere as well as an important aspect of the environment nationally. This also puts Canada in a distinguished position in terms of reputation. So Canada is often reminded as a good practice and has provided a number of consultants and strategic efforts in other areas of the world as well, in process both of co-op development and transition. As a result, we do have a very friendly cooperative culture in the country, with very successful stories that has been sporadically not very well coordinated, collected, and leaving aside all the best practices that are recognized in Canada and the expertise it has as well. But despite of what Canada has that provides its possibilities of BCCs, there is a big lack, according to them, of coordination among these strategies and specific policies at province levels that more easily allow the mobilization of resources for BCC completion, process completion. So, okay, so what is then, according to this informant, required for a successful BCC in Canada? Well, political will was number one reference to them. They looked at areas both in the country and outside and verified that there is highly political involvement wherever BCCs are most successful. And this was also present, particularly in Quebec. This allows, of course, for specific programs that allow for general public to know about BCC as an option, that allows for specific programs for capacity building and training of the new demands of business management and governance in ways that are different in the way that used to be. Capitalization is indeed a major issue for most of the interviewees considered, but most of them thinking that more important is the need for the existence of mechanisms that allow funding not only for the acquisition of the firm, but for all the small steps that are required from the moment that the owner decided to go through the conversion process to the moment that the organization now goes into business as usual on the new ownership. And for this to happen, there is a demand for a new culture of business development that goes beyond the regular capitalist system of emphasizing business development for private firms and incorporate ways that acknowledge the economic value, the business value of cooperatives as well, and the possibilities of success for new work-owned or member-owned cooperatives. Another aspect is that the need, of course, for successful stories. As the map Marcelo puts together and the story that José mentioned, there is lots of successful stories that in country in this large history, but there is a huge, according to the interviews, a huge lack of documentation of the success. And this is fundamental when we engage or they engage in process of supporting decision-making of owners, decision-making of workers engaging into a conversion process. Okay, so where are we now?
Sorry, am I on the right slide? So we should probably wrap it up.
Sure. Okay. I am now going into what is identified as enabling practice or opportunities as identified for them. They mainly looked they identified obviously what exists out there in Europe, Italy, France, and Spain particularly, but the focus was mainly here in the United States because also of the proximity to the country. And in terms of opportunity in the United States, they mentioned that a great accomplishment for them was the Main Street Ownership Act, which gave the employment ownership a unique how can I say, a unique focus in terms of directing institutional efforts. Before everything from the government, federal government, came specifically for private companies, and now the new act foresees specific mechanisms for supporting employment ownership, distinguishing both ESOPs and worker co-ops. Another aspect is the mechanism that exists there for funding. They mentioned the existence of, as a result of this national restructuring, what they call the community development financial institutions that then from the National Treasury of the United States channel the funding for these initiatives. In terms of ecosystem, there is what they call the ICA group that brings together a number of organizations that support raising funds for acquisition and the process of conversion. A greatest aspect, I would say, from the US aspect is the capacity they have to mobilize networks locally, regionally. As for example, we have John here from the Northwest Pacific area that combines a number of regions working together with the same mission, co-op development, and in particular also conversion. We have the area of the Maritimes United States, Maine. We have the area of Massachusetts, and this work is in very strong network hubs in the network that allow the conversion process and also the emergence of big numbers in the country, particularly in the last few years. Yeah, I think those are the main aspects. And one learning that we get for all this is that BCCs are situated in particular contexts in which they are enacted, in that takes into consideration, of course, the relationships at jurisdictional level, interaction between the actors involved, and the availability of resources. So we have this interesting quote there that specifies the uniqueness case of Quebec, precisely because of the strongest components of enabling environment vis-a-vis the remaining country, but outlining that there is lots of opportunities there for growing. I think that's pretty much.
Thanks,
it's
Marcelo.
a lot of information to synthesize in 15 minutes.
That's great. We're going to hear 3 successful stories now from that we've documented from Fiona and Daria.
Great. Thank you, Marcelo, and Jose for setting us up in a perfect way. We are going to, Daria and I, jump into the case studies that we have done. Not all of them have been successful. We tried to choose so that we can gain lessons and understanding from a buffet of different cases. So in total, we've done 13 cases with 5 more on the go towards the end of this project. You can see here the selection criteria. We really wanted to make sure we had a good representation of cases from across Canada. So we picked based on province, based on language, based on the type that they converted to, as well as the industry or sector that they are involved in. We also thought about that maturity piece, like have they been around for a long time or are they just new? thinking about the rural-urban examples, as well as, hey, what's going on here? That sort of curious factor. This really seems very different, or we really need to know more about this. You can see the list of case studies that we have done so far. I will just flag that Jose is going to be presenting a little later on about some of these in Quebec that you see. And also Jonathan is going to be presenting on the almost but not quite examples. Thanks, Jonathan, in the afternoon session. So how did we do all this? We took a case study methodology processes here. We all jumped into the desk work. We did literature reviews. We did document analysis. We did online reviews of websites, any kind of social media that emerged. And then after we've done that, to get a sense of the context and also the conversion to a co-op, sometimes this was more robust, as you can imagine, than other times, depending on, especially if it hit the media in any kind of way. But then, so we really wanted to hear the inside stories. So then we turned our attention to doing some interviews. And in this case, we did interviews with a range of stakeholders. Sometimes it was the new owners of the co-op. Sometimes it was the previous owners of the co-op, or of the business, pardon me. Sometimes those previous owners were now members of the co-op. We took the members if in fact they were not, they were more consumer or community co-op. Sometimes they were clients of the co-op itself. So we really tried to get a good sort of 360 view of the cases. Thanks, Marcel. I'm going to jump into our first example. I had the pleasure to work on this one, the Kincardine Ladies Fitness Co-op. And here you can see a picture of some of the core founding group as well as members. In this case, we're just going to do a little sort of snapshot dive into three. This is the one that I'm going to do. Jerry is going to do two others. But as Marcelo said, stay tuned. We are going to be able to allow you to do a deeper dive with some publications that are coming up. So just treat this as like a little taste test on our case studies. Okay, so the Kincardine Ladies Fitness Co-op. Kincardine is a small town in Ontario. This is an amazing example, really, of going from the multinational franchise in a fitness company called Curves. Some of you might have remembered it. And really now seeing how members of Curves could in fact say, hey, we could do this ourselves. And so it's an example of the global multi-franchise, multinational franchise to being actually developed in a very local kind of way. So when Curves was looking like it was taking a downward curve, the members said, no, we want to continue to have our own fitness co-op. We want to be able to continue to do the kinds of workouts in the kinds of ways that we want to. How can we make this happen? And they excitingly seized the moment, and they didn't know anything about the co-op model beforehand, and ultimately didn't have a ton of support in creating their co-op either, because for the most part they were pretty resourceful. They just made it happen. What they were able to do was run all the numbers to recognize that it could be a viable business. That's one of our keys. And what they could realize here is that it doesn't need to be a for-profit. So in the case of Curves, of course, the money as a profit business and as a franchise, we're seeing the money exit out of the community as a multinational franchise. But we're also seeing people having to be paid, including the owner. Whereas in this case, the Kincardine Ladies Fitness Co-op, they were able to say, hey, we don't actually need staff because we can all do it ourselves. And hey, we don't have to pay out a franchisee. We can just do it here on our own. So it's a really amazing example of seizing and making happen what they need in their community for their membership. Just one of the key components here is they had a super supportive previous owner who was able to hold on to the equipment, and then they were able to buy the equipment really quickly, but they were able to do that because they were an enabling previous owner. And then, as I said, they're able to streamline exactly what they want because they get to make the choices. And they were able to cut out all of the extraneous costs because now they do it themselves. So we wanted to bring this case study to you because it is such a great example of local people making it happen for themselves, no leakage outside of their community, and directly defined for their membership what exactly they want in terms of the service, in this case, fitness. So I'm going to turn it to Daria to jump into a couple more great examples.
All right, hello everyone. So I'll just jump right into this amazing example of a conversion. This is the Glitter Bean Cafe in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And it is the only LGBTQ plus oriented space in the city of Halifax that does not offer alcohol. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but just the general idea of this, and that was the title of the case study we wrote on it, is that this is more than just saving jobs or saving a cafe. It's really saving a space that is essential for a community. So initially, this group mobilized through a labor dispute that actually lasted 8 years and 2 owners. Interesting enough, one of the key players in the conversion, Just Us Coffee Roasters, was the initial owner of this cafe. So Just Us is a producer cooperative from the Annapolis Valley, so outside of the city in Nova Scotia. And they decided to open up cafes that are outside of their community. And one of those cafes was in Halifax. And over the years, the workforce of this cafe became very oriented towards LGBTQ plus members of the LGBTQ plus community. However, they started experiencing issues, primarily because Just Us would just hire a manager to sort of run the cafe that was outside of the cooperative culture, and they really started experiencing issues with with this manager and eventually with Just Us. But what happened is that they mobilized. They mobilized as a workforce, and in 2013 they unionized with the Service Employees Union International. And then, as things were going on, the management at Just Us changed, and things were sort of getting better. But then Just Us decided that this is actually not for them, that they want to close down their cafes that were outside of the valley. And they sold the cafe to a gentleman who owns the Hebron Hospitality Group. And this is where I'm quoting members. I apologize. I'm quoting worker members. This is when shit hits the fan. This is when their wages are not getting paid, and he's very unresponsive, and eventually they they have a huge fallout, of course, and then the cafe actually closes in 2018, and they find themselves at this crossroads of, okay, we have 8 years of 5 years of unionization experience, over a decade of collectively working together and running this cafe. Why don't we own it? And this is when they decide to pursue conversion into a co-op. But however, as I said, for them, this was more than saving their jobs. This, at that point, was the only LGBTQ plus safe space for individuals who are underage or who are sober. So saving that space really meant a lot. And they use this as a community space. Organizations would come here and give presentations and talks and events. So this was very, very important. And during the conversion process, they got great support from the union, who paid to hire a cooperative developer. So this is something that we heard, and this is something we hear in a lot of the cases, is that the workers knew how to do the operations of the cafe, but owning and running it from a business perspective is a completely different skill set that in traditional business ownership they are excluded from these processes, right? So the management succession is a big issue that keeps coming up in every conversion, right? And hiring a cooperative developer, someone experienced, really helped with that process. And also, just as coffee roasters were also very supportive during this process of helping them convert into a co-op, because they knew, the operations of a co-op and whatnot. They even provided them to with a financial person to help with the process. And also, they also benefited from one of the parents of the worker members was a business prof, so that also helped. And they did this all with sweat equity and no government financial support, which is a testament to the enabling environment they had in terms of support organizations. But it's also a cautionary tale that if it didn't exist, this would have been a very, very difficult process. Marcel, next slide, please.
Yep, this is one of Canada's examples of a labor conflict conversion similar to Argentina's, by the way. So
exactly, it's a union co-op. And the worker members are still unionized, and the employees, if they hire them, they're unionized. The other example I want to talk to you, so I talked about a worker-led conversion. Now I want to talk about a community-led conversion. So Moonbeam is a francophone community in Northern Ontario, so it's a Franco-Ontarien community. And there was only one grocery store that was owned by a family, and the third generation grocer said, you know what, this is not for me, I'm going to close it down. At that point, the closest grocery store is a 25-minute drive away. And a lot of the members of the community heard from neighboring towns that, you first lose your grocery store, and then goes the hardware store, and then goes the church, and then goes to school, and then you become dependent to outside. So it was very important for them to, safeguard their local economy through keeping, and also there were a lot of local cheese shops and a lot of local artisans used to sell their produce through products through this store. So what happens is that when they hear about this, some local champions come up, one municipal councillor, and they say, hey, we cannot let this happen. What we need to do is mobilize and collectively purchase our grocery store. But what really helped is that they actually have a history of saving critical institutions and services within their community. They saved a nearby park from being sold, privatized, and a local ski hill back in the 90s. And with influential members of the local community mobilizing people, they raised capital very, very quickly and even over their target, as you can see. And what they also had access to was local residents with key legal and financial skills. As I said, this can be quite a complex legal and financial process. And having someone to guide the co-op through that's from the community and that's providing sweat equity that's on the board, proved to be really helpful and help with this lack of policy enabling the environment, right? So we keep going back to these examples where there are factors that come in to fill the void. And the co-op experienced steady growth and is currently looking to purchase a larger building to still compete, because some people still drive 25 minutes to go to the big box store. Marcel, next slide. Okay, so we saw that this is very, very quickly. We saw that there's 3 critical catalyzers through our case studies. These are some initial learnings: business succession, worker mobilization, and community mobilization. And given the lack of a enabling policy environment, we saw how critical it was the role of co-op developers, support organizations, especially with what some key informants that Marcelo mentioned called friendly financing. Community characteristics, right? What type of skills are available? What kind of dedication is available? And also the role of the previous boss, as Fiona talked about it, this management succession is such a big issue. Them being supportive and helping the new group sort of learn how to manage is very important. And some key informants suggested that this is like a 3-year process, right, where the two keep working together. I'll pass it right back to Fiona as we wrap up.
Thank you. Okay, some of the next steps for the case studies. So we have to complete our other ones. You can see here what we're going to do. And then, as we mentioned before, we're going to create reports as well as some 3-pagers for a little sort of lighter touch. And then for the even quicker digestion, the 1-page sort of snapshots of these case studies. And these are going to be for the co-ops themselves to be able to use, but also for the co-op sector. As we've heard time and time again, everyone's looking for examples of this. And so we're about to start to disseminate and deliver on that. And then we're also going to be doing some cross case study analysis. And so we've just begun this with the previous slide. But what we want to do is to dive deeper. Like, what do we see across all of these? Or what can we understand if we slice and dice depending on what case studies we use? So for example, if we bring a gender lens, what do we actually find? If we look at certain co-ops that are in the worker co-op space, what do we find? Do that kind of thing. So we want to do some slicing and dicing and see what kind of things emerge in that cross case study moment. We also want to be able to bring in, because we haven't done this as much yet, and so it's sort of part of our next steps, is to bring in those lessons learned that Marcelo Castro spoke about earlier on, for sure. Bring in that overall literature review that Marcelo Vieta was talking about, as another big component of the overall co-op convert study. So we've still got some work to do on our case studies here, but we're really looking forward to being able to get out the ones that we've got done, so that they can start to do the amazing work that these folks have already been doing in their communities, and we can start to do this promotional piece around what can be done for workers, for communities, for consumers, depending on what pathway, as Marcelo said earlier on, they're taking.
Okay, so we've got another session at 1 o'clock where we will be talking about other elements, dimensions to our project. You will notice that the difference between when Claude Andre and Jose and Etienne present on 3 Quebec cases, the main difference between the ad hoc approach in the rest of Canada to the more structured ecosystem that Quebec has. And so there's a big discrepancy in Canada with conversions to co-ops, which is not only a way of saving businesses and jobs, but also of cooperative development. It's a major cooperative development strategy that even the co-op sector in the rest of Canada isn't kind of capitalizing on. So we'll be talking about this later on this afternoon. We have time for a few questions. We don't have much time. Hopefully this afternoon we'll have more time. And usually we've been posing questions in the chat, and I'm wondering if there are any. I'm just reading it here, or we can just speak up. We have a few minutes left.
I have a quick question.
Yes, John.
Is there I guess a group of co-op developers in Canada, like in the US, we have Cooperation Works, which is a network of 37 centers and about 20 or 30 independent cooperative developers that provide resources to each other. We also have Worker to Ownership Collaborative, which is done through Dowie. Is there a similar structure in Canada?
No, not as densely networked and connected as the states. With the employee ownership centers and Dowie and ICA group and all of these initiatives like Marcelo was mapping out. But we do have a group of about, last time I spoke to Hazel Corcoran and Russ Christensen, there were about 24 people that are very familiar with that are co-op developers mostly, that are familiar with conversions to co-ops. But there isn't, and they did start a few years ago Co-op Zone, which was back in the early 2000s. It's the only kind of initiative, like umbrella initiative, that we have in Canada that's similar. Quebec is different though. Quebec, and Claude Andre can speak to this, and Jose, they've got their regional cooperative development. I'm sorry, I got family in the background here. The regional cooperative development initiatives and everything. So their infrastructure is very different, but the rest of Canada, not as structured as and this is one of the things that we want to kind of promote or kind of encourage the development of. The provincial associations have been great, some more stronger than others, and then the federations, like the CWCF has done amazing work over the years, and we're really building on the work that the CWCF has done. Anybody else? But we need to learn from the US model of business ownership, of community ownership, and worker ownership. And this is one of the major drivers behind us doing a best practices analysis, where we're mapping out how it happens in the US, how it happens in Spain, how it happens in Italy, how it happens in France. These are the major areas in the world that Canada could learn from, and then how to kind of build that similar type of infrastructure in Canada.
Marcel, there is something being formed in Nova Scotia in the Council of Cooperatives in the area that comprises also New Brunswick. They are doing a major attempt in forming a local network, which includes the French-speaking aspect of the Maritimes area as well. That will be closer to a kind of a network of organizations and individuals.
Yeah, actually, Fiona's been working with them. She's been representing CoopConvert on the ACOA initiative, which was a maritime kind of regional, including Newfoundland, initiative to promote cooperative development, conversions, and that. So maybe Fiona can speak to that. I don't know if, I mean, there are initiatives afoot that are bringing different regions, different provinces together.
Yeah, in the Maritimes, there haven't been a ton of examples actually of conversions. I actually didn't find any in Newfoundland at all. It would be great if anybody who knows of any co-ops that are conversions, feel free to throw them our way, and we'll just be able to cross-reference them to the database that Jose and Marcelo talked about. So if you know of one and you want to throw it our way, we can jump into it. But in Atlantic Canada, they sometimes it takes them digging under the rocks too, because people don't necessarily recognize it as a conversion either. It's not a part of people's sort of lexicon of how they're thinking about development. And if it happened a long time ago, then maybe people who currently work there or are involved in the co-op have never had any, they have no idea the history of it. So those very mature ones also can sometimes be a little bit hard to dig out.
Yeah, and let me say that we've captured most of the conversions that we know of in Canada. Some have happened in the past, so we haven't captured all of those. Jack Quarter did work on this in the 80s. But for example, and I know Mitch isn't on the panel. I don't know if we've captured your conversion, Mitch. We have. So our database is in development. It's emerging. So we have a section of it that's not public, that's up and coming conversions. They're in the process of converting. We have another section that Jonathan Silver will talk about this afternoon, where almost conversions. They tried to convert, but it didn't quite happen. We have a listing of those. We have a listing of inactive. So, but this is a very much work in progress, and the project will continue through this database, which we will be working on with CMC on an ongoing basis, and their mapping initiative that we've been able to fit into as well. And I've had a question I want to kind of answer before our time is up. Are we looking at other initiatives? Yes. We are mostly focusing on Canada because nothing like this has been done in Canada. A systematic look at conversions to co-ops in Canada. We're the first project to do this systematically. Other projects have done aspects of it, but this is the first systematic cross-Canada approach. This has been done in Italy. I led a project that did this. We tracked worker buyouts in Italy. In France, some work has been done in Spain. So we're also looking at these other jurisdictions to see how things are done there, what the process is there of conversion, what the infrastructure and enabling environments are there for us then to be able to compare and contrast to Canada, and to be able to offer kind of educational kind of information best practices. So maybe this could help the Canadian cooperative sector and business development sector and developing similar policies and initiatives. So I think we're right up to 10:30. I think we're keeping it a tight ship here in this conference. I noticed we're not going over much. So let's continue the conversation this afternoon. So if you're interested, hopefully we'll have more time to talk at 1 o'clock, which is part 2 of this panel. And Jonathan Silver, we'll be talking about the almost converted, and the Itacus team will be talking about Quebec. And Eric Gosling and I will be talking about a SME, our SME survey, our succession and co-op conversion survey that we did with SME owners across Canada. So thank you so much. Daria, you want to wrap it up, or?
It's wrapped up.
Okay.
Enjoy the break, everyone, and we'll